Michelle,
Stephen.
let's see. Happy New Year? No, we had Tone on before for New Year's. Okay, not
Yeah,
Happy New
and
Year.
end of January. No
It's
more,
so
no more
old already,
Happy New Yearing.
2022. When will 2023 be here? I can't wait because then the
Oh
elections will
no.
be over. At least we'll be past that. Anyway, staying on a positive note, how's
Stephen,
your weather?
are you staying warm? It is minus 25 in Montreal today.
Well,
That's Celsius,
Montreal,
but I think by the time you get into minus 25 Celsius and Fahrenheit kind of end up being the same.
pretty close. So it's not that cold here, though. We did have snow in North Carolina. I got to sled. I went sledding down our gravel road that had just enough snow on it. But yeah, we're staying warm, okay. And by the way, when humans complain about how cold it is, I know you're not really complaining. You like being outdoors and so on.
I do.
What we're really saying is, humans probably shouldn't be in that part of planet Earth. There are so many parts of planet Earth we really shouldn't be in because we didn't evolve to live in places like this. So we have to degrade our environment to keep us nice and warm. So there. Okay.
I'm quite happy living in Canada, I have to say. If
Yeah.
anywhere, yeah.
Humans have fun living all over. And of course, they can live even in cold places without degrading their environments. Like
Yes,
the
I think
Inuits
that's
and
possible.
indigenous peoples. Okay, but moving on to PL SQL. So I got to say, I'm having so much fun at InSum. I'm so glad I joined InSum. By the way, folks, Michelle did not ask me to say that. Francis didn't ask me to say that. It was all my idea. So what I've been doing lately is building some really cool code because, I'm a programmer. I really like to code.
You're geeking out a little, Stephen. I love it. I was telling Francis this morning, I think Stephen's enjoying geeking out.
When am I not geeking out on InSum hours?
All right.
I'm always geeking out on InSum, but yes, I'm getting so I'm building this cool utility for folks at InSum to use called InSum Mail. I'll actually give you a quick look at it, and we'll probably do a Feuertip on it in the future. I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to share it publicly, et cetera, but there are some interesting lessons to learn. But I did run into some really interesting challenges doing that, and I came up with this cool, what I think is really cool utility to share with folks today. So I want to talk about conditional compilation, which is a feature in PL SQL that pretty much nobody uses, understandably in some ways, and but I do. And I want to talk about some of the lessons I learned and how to apply it. Anyway, so have you ever been involved in a project where you build Oracle backend code, SQL, PL SQL, et cetera, to be installed on possibly multiple versions of Oracle database?
Generally, when I'm working on a project, I'm gonna say no.
Exactly.
Although obviously at InSum we do that a lot. So I think very.
But in general, the answer that developers have to that question is multiple versions of Oracle. I can only work on one version of Oracle at a time. But of course, if you're building a product that you're selling and you want to support multiple versions of Oracle, or even you work in a really big company, you've got an application that for some reason is installed in multiple divisions and they have different instances of Oracle, you could have different versions. Now, when you're writing code that has to support different versions of Oracle database, we're going to go on from there, but Oracle database for starters, there are roughly two approaches you can take. One is lowest common denominator coding. So I want to support Oracle 11 to Oracle, current. So if I want my code to compile on every one of those versions, I can't use any new features added in future versions past 11. Otherwise, it won't compile on 11, which really kind of stinks. The second approach you can take if you don't like LCD programming is I could have multiple copies of my code, separate files, each for the different version of Oracle, maximizing the features in each one. Oh yeah, right. Like I'm going to support 6 copies of my code. What a disaster. So in Oracle 10G, Oracle introduced conditional compilation as part of their complete rewrite of the Oracle PL SQL compiler. And one of the main use cases for conditional compilation is to support the ability to write one body of code that will use the maximal feature set of any version you install on. So let me show you that basic use case in the syntax behind conditional compilation, and then we'll move on from there about why I started playing around with this. So share my screen, please.
I will share your screen. But by the way, anybody watching, we'd love to hear from you as well, whether or not you work with different versions of the database. If you use conditional compilation, that sort of thing, pop in.
Right. If any of you have experience with conditional compilation, let us know there. And it looks like I'm now asking darn SQL developer to recompile. Geez, I hate when you do that. It's frozen. Oh, sublime it is. Okay, let's bring up some code via Sublime. There it is. Okay. Hopefully they can see this pretty well. Can I just make it bigger really easily? Yes. Okay, so here's the basic idea behind conditional compilation. I've got a piece of code in my package, and all right, let's check SQL Developer to see if it came alive. Yes, it came alive. Okay, so we'll do it in SQL Developer. Here we go. I'll make the font size bigger too. Sorry, folks, I forgot to do that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to do that, please.
Okay, so I've got a piece of code that works with collections. And hopefully, well, you may not know this, but as of 10.2, not only was conditional compilation added, and that's the $ syntax, but first of all, the indices of feature for all was implemented. So I can simply say, look for all the indexes defined here and do an insert based on those values in that collection. Prior to 10.2, I would have to do something like this, basically compress my collection, get rid of any of the blank spots, any of the gaps in the collection. So here's an example of using conditional compilation for versioning of my code, essentially. $ is the indication for a conditional compilation. It's sort of like meta code in PL SQL. This is a command to the compiler saying either include or exclude this code. So what I'm saying is if I'm on a version of the database, here's this package, I'll come back to it, that says I'm less than or equal to 10.1, use this, otherwise use this. I'm going to compile my code. And then I'm going to say, show me, here's this program that says, show me what was actually compiled into the database. So I run the script.
And I think what you're doing here, Stephen, is actually answering a comment of Plamens, who's asking, are there so many differences that require conditional compilation? So I don't know if you're going to go through other examples of different
use cases for conditional compilation?
Yeah, exactly.
I might, we'll see.
Okay.
Partly that's not the point of this tip. So here we go. I compiled my package. I'm on 20.21, I believe, actually. So here's what it was actually compiled into the database. Look at all these blank lines, and here's my 10.2 and above code. So the point here is that it did the right thing, right? So this was actually compiled into my database. This is what I'm running. But it's also pretty sophisticated in that it didn't just get rid of all this other code, it replaced it with blank lines. And that's so if you have an error and you see the format call stack or the error backtrace, it's preserved the line numbers in your original source code, which is, really nice. So that's the basic idea behind this use case of database versioning for my PL SQL code. And the bottom line is that inside this $if, I can reference PL SQL conditional compilation flags like anything I want to define. Or you can reference a static expression, which is essentially a constant whose value is fixed at compile time. So this is a Boolean variable. We'll take a look at a package like this that I'm going to show you for Apex. So this was what I can do inside my PL SQL code. And of course, very few people do it. Now, I decided to start working on this really cool utility called InSumMail. And the bottom line is that Apex has this Apex_mail package, which is really nice, makes emailing easy, but there's very little built around it to support common production needs for email management. And I've multiple times written the same packages, the same template support, et cetera, for different InSum projects and more before that. And I decided I don't want to keep doing that. I want to create basically a console where I can manage email in my applications, do all sorts of great stuff. So this is the InSumMail configuration. We're not going to go into the details of it. But the bottom line is that this sits on top of Apex_mail. And one of the requirements of the features of InSumMail will be that you can literally globally search and replace Apex_mail with InSum_mail. And your code will just work as it did before, plus all the additional great features of InSumMail. So I have to support the Oracle Apex Mail API. Now, let's take a look at that. apex.oracle.com/API. Takes me right to the API doc, which is a wonderful shortcut. I go to Apex Mail. And the bottom line is I want to support all of this stuff. Every single element in the package should be in InSumMail. I can do that, but here's the kicker. Changes in release 21.2. Let's see. Apex Mail. Is there mail here? It should be here. Wait a minute. We're not listing new features. Maybe it was 22.21.1. Okay. In 22.1, I guess it was, a couple of changes were made. One is they added a new procedure to add CLOB attachments. And if we look at, I believe, this send, when I'm sending based on an Apex email template, I can also provide a language override. This is new for 21.1. So here's the situation. I'm writing code in some mail, and here's my compatibility. Here are all the programs that are part of the compatibility API, though I've got a lot more beyond that. And here's my send, and here's my language override. But if I have my language override added in, this will not compile in Apex versions prior to 22.1 or 21.1 or whatever it was. That's no good, right? So the bottom line is I need the same capability as DBMSDB version, but for Apex. Ideally, it would kind of look like this. Right, so if the Apex version was less than or equal to 20, if the Apex version was less than or equal to 21.1, so I want to do the same thing with Apex that I do with the database, but Apex doesn't provide a package like this. Now, I think they should. It's easy enough to do. Every time they deploy a new version of Apex, they give you a little updated package, just like the database team does. But here's one of the situations where, yes, Apex team should do it. Yes, I should submit an idea. I think I already did, and maybe they'll implement it. But we can actually do this ourselves. So that's what I want to share with you today, is how I solved this problem for me for Apex, and you can do it yourself. And then I want to show you an even more general solution, which should get you all really excited. But first, any questions or comments I should look at?
I think Niels is saying, who uses 10G anymore? Hopefully not too many, but I'm sure.
No question. That was just an example of code I've got. I should probably come up with a more recent version check thing to look at, but it makes the point pretty simply and clearly.
When you were talking about installing INSA Mail and just doing sort of a global replace of Apex Mail for INSA Mail, and it would just work. Peter put this comment in, this question in, that he's interested in the global replace procedure. Now, I don't think there's an actual procedure, right? You're just talking about going through the code and doing a kind of search and replace, right? Nothing fancier than that.
There's nothing I'm building that would do the global search and replace for you. You'd probably want to, one of the easiest things to do is, if you're using supporting objects in Apex, which I've started to do a lot of because of Anton Nielsen, and I'll show you my supporting objects that include this code. One of the cool things is you can export your application. It has all the package definitions in it, all your whole code base. In theory, maybe you can do a global search and replace in that one file and then re-import your application. That's pretty cool. But in general, no, I'm not going to do that sort of thing for you. You do it yourself. And we have a question from Plowman. Is conditional formatting documented? Plowman, do you mean that it keeps the blank lines present? Honestly, I don't remember if that's documented or not. It probably is. And by the way, it's not only lines, it's even the column point in the line itself, because that line information is also given in some of the stacks and traces. Where can we find a complete list of those conditional variables you use in the $if? So in the blog post I'm about to publish after this talk, you'll see a whole list of resources, including the Oracle documentation for DBMSDB version and so on. But you can also, how easily can I just show a DBMSDB version package? I don't think I've got it right offhand, but there's always the DBMSDB version. You can just do essentially a describe on that. And beyond those, it's any package that has static expressions in it can be used. In terms of the conditional flags, those are documented along with conditional compilation. There are a number of PL/SQL environmental flags that are predefined for you.
Just as a reminder to folks watching, Stephen mentioned the blog, all the blogs that he publishes that go along with Feuertips. We do end up linking them from the Feuertips page, so you can go there.
Or just search on Feuertip. It's a nice
search on Feuertip. Yeah.
And Judith asks, we once maintained an old Oracle 7 application which had to communicate with 11G. Did you use conditional compilation, Judith? Is that what you're saying? Or it just worked and that's good? And then finally, a comment from Plummen, any official, or yeah, so there is lots of documentation on conditional compilation. There's also a document, again, it's in the blog post that I'll publish. There's a use case document that's about 100 pages long that was written by the then PL SQL product manager, Bryn Llewellyn. And it documents multiple use cases. And that's where you'd want to really go to start learning how to use conditional compilation. Again, sorry, the focus on this tip is not conditional compilation per se, but look what you can do. So let's go back to looking at what we can do.
All
so
right.
we could share my screen again. And of course, obviously pop in with any questions that pop up. Okay, so I want to be able to do this. Now, I could, of course, just sit there and literally type and create a package with the correct Boolean expressions in them and use it. But I don't want to have to do that. And also, if I have a hard-coded package in my application, what happens when I move that application to a new version of Apex? So here's what I decided to do instead. Let's go over to, okay, let's not show you my email. Let's go into Cloud Dev. That's my spam folder. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to take you behind the scenes of In Some Mail. So here's my application, and we use supporting objects, installation scripts. So I've got, for example, my In Some Mail package spec right here, and this have the conditional compilation logic at the bottom here somewhere. Probably not worth our time to be searching.
That's looking a little small. If you can plus that up a little bit. Yep.
Thanks. Is that good?
Yep, much better, thanks.
So there's my conditional compilation logic. But here's the thing. Before I create any of my packages, I run this script. So here's a body of code, completely generic, that queries the current Apex version information. So there's 20.21.1 is the version number, or it's actually a lot longer than that. I just pull out the version and the release. This is using the same nomenclature that DBMS DB version is. So if it's 21.2, 21 is the version, 2 is the release. And then I literally put together a package. And notice I've hard-coded as the minimum version, my starting point 18. And then it will generate all the different Boolean expressions or Boolean constants and then compile it for me. So every time I run the installation objects, installation scripts for this application, when it's compiled into a new version, of course, you can run this. We could even set up an automation, I suppose, that says, run this script once a day in case you happen to have moved to a new version. But the bottom line is that after running that block of code, I end up with a package that looks like this. So there it is. There's my Apex versioning package, right? So all of these are false because I'm not less than equal to these. It's a 20 release, 20 version, and it's 20.2 that I'm on, right? So I integrated into my application through the supporting objects installation scripts. Every time I run these scripts, this package is recreated, setting up all the variables I need in the rest of my code, which I thought was a pretty nice little implementation. But then I thought, wait a minute, why would I do this just for Apex? Or really what I thought, you can stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to just go back to talking. So then I thought to myself, well, DBMS DB version, almost nobody uses that. How many people are building APIs on top of Oracle Apex APIs? Probably not that many. I'd really like it if other people use this stuff. Then I thought to myself, well, there's nothing Apex specific about this code I wrote. I just happen to get the version information from Apex. What if you have your own product that you're building, that even inside your own company, you've got to support across multiple versions of Oracle, or you're selling a third-party product, and you don't want to version against Oracle. You need to version against your own product APIs. One customer needs to upgrade to the newer version with newer stuff. The same kind of issue can be anybody's issue within their own product family. So, share my screen. So I decided to take it to the next level. And in fact, I'll just go right over to Live SQL now. If you go to Live SQL, see if I'm still signed in, please. Yeah, right, of course. Yeah, right, of course. Oh, for heaven's sake. I've created a script that will work generically across whatever product you want to tell us about. Now, if I search for conditional, we'll see a lot of scripts for conditional compilation, which, you can just check all these out when you've got time. And maybe I'll look back at some of these when I'm done here with this. But right now, what I want to do is go down to generate conditional compilation version package for any product. All right. So what I do now is I create my version function for Apex. The bottom line is that you create a function that returns the version number in version.release. So that's the requirement. I've created this procedure, compile conditional compilation version package 4. Sometimes I really like having more than 30 characters to work with the names. You pass in the product name. You pass in the name of the function you want me to call, the minimum version, like starting from 18, the number of releases. For example, for Apex, it's 2, 15.1, 15.2, 21.1, 21.2, and whether or not you want to see it. And then I call your function dynamically. I get your version number. I break it up into version and release. Then it's pretty much the same code as before, but it's not specific to Apex. So I create my package. Sorry about the color coding inside LiveSQL. I'm not with Oracle, so I don't really have to apologize anymore for it. I just wish they would fix it. And then I go for my minimum version number, not hard-coded at 18, and then my maximum release number. So, I do the things you want to do, generate the code, and then here's the call to this function to generate the Oracle Apex version package, 18 and 2. Now, I think this will not actually run yet. Let's try it. Some of you may know, LiveSQL restricts access to a lot of Oracle views. And I found when I tried to run this script a couple of weeks ago that Apex release, returning the release of the Apex version, was not yet supported in LiveSQL, which seemed kind of silly. So I put in a request for an enhancement, and they are going to add select authority on select privileges on Apex release. So hopefully they'll upgrade it in the next week or two. You'll be able to run this to completion successfully. But the bottom line is that you can download this script right now. You can use it with your own versioning. Again, just get your own versioning function, and you're good to go. You can create these packages for yourself. So let's go back over to SQL Developer. Let's run it here, but I'm just going to have some, okay. We'll just run this just to show you that it works the same. Hopefully we won't have to reconnect and spend half an hour. So more comments, questions?
I was muted, sorry. Question from Barry.
So does conditional compilation extend to use of wrap? So conditional compilation, when you wrap...
Niels has got an answer here.
Hey.
Neil.
But it's not quite accurate, Niels. Niels, wrapping is not encryption. It's obfuscation. I don't want to set anybody wrong on this one. When you wrap PL SQL code, it's not truly encrypted. It's not hard to unwrap it and see most of the code that was compiled. Minor point. Thanks, Niels. And it seems like they should be compatible. I'm thinking that when I compile my code, again, that's the pre-compilation step with conditional compilation. So it seems like it should be okay. And then Niels also documented, right, that you've got full documentation. Okay, so that all looks good. Okay, so let's go back over to my script. It did reconnect. And then here's the package. So now I have my Oracle Apex version, passed it in, and it created this package. Again, the same thing you saw before. But if I run it again, let's say my product, I'm going from 10. And we generally do 5 sub-releases before we go to the new release. And it could be, my product. I'll just leave the same version thing in there, my product. Run this. Now we see a very different package. You can see it running through all those different versions and 5 releases per version. There you go. Now, you might say, well, sometimes we have 2, sometimes we have 3. We don't have a fixed number. Well, then set your max release to something you know is more than enough. It doesn't matter if it's got variables that you're never going to use. They're just sitting in the package. They're just constants. So it doesn't really matter. And it can be a lot bigger than this, and it really won't matter either. Okay, so that is my tip for this week. Any more questions? I don't think wrapping should conflict. Yep. That should work out okay. So to sum up, conditional compilation is a cool feature. Check it out. There are other use cases besides the multi-versioning. but this is probably the most important one. I'll give you an example. You can actually, with conditional compilation, you could set a rule like this procedure, this package has to be compiled with optimization level set to 3. So the default optimization level is 2. You never want it to be set to 1. You can actually put pre-compilation rules that raise an error. One of the conditional compilation features is $error. And you can literally force a compilation error by saying, no, the optimization level is too low. So there are a number of interesting things you can do with conditional compilation. But I found it fun that I could not only see that there was I'd like to do this with DBMSDB version, and of course I can do it with a package. I can generate it. I can generate it for any product you want. That was fun.
Nice.
Thanks. All right, 11:26. So obviously keep your comments and questions coming in. But in the meantime, we'll move along to our final soft touches, geeky touches of our show. So let's see, I'm supposed to come up with a favorite book and organizations. Okay, so first of all, I'll show you 3 organizations. Michelle, you're going to pick the person, right? So let
me know when you're ready to share your screen.
Go ahead. So I've got 3 organizations for this week. One is Save the Whales. You know, it's bad enough that elephants are probably being driven to extinction without much we can do about it. It's even crazier to think that we might do the same thing to whales. So let's not let it happen, at least on our watch. So a donation to help the whales survive the human onslaught. Water First NGO. So this is it's an organization committed to helping solve water crises in indigenous communities. I've had a number of organizations focused around indigenous peoples in the last several Feuertips, in part because it's clear that when it comes to saving our planet and healing our planet, we need to learn from, respect, and support indigenous populations around the world. And finally, giraffe conservation. So also, we don't want giraffes to go away. We want them to survive. They're amazing creatures. And one of the things that's really amazing about them, I believe one of my previous favorite books was Your Inner Fish, that talks about how the human body evolved from former, shapes that are also informing other mammals and other creatures. And the giraffe is a great example of how unintelligently we are designed, because we evolved with incremental changes and adapted to things. Just the way their neck works and the nerves going up and down their neck, it's extraordinary. So whales, water for indigenous communities, giraffes. So that's the choices. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my favorite book of the week, and it is called The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. Now,
before you go on, Stephen, if you're still on, if you can, while Stephen's presenting his book, if you can let us know who you'd like our donation to go to this week.
And so the book is called Hidden Life of Trees, and for some reason his website, even though I can choose English as a language, doesn't change the names of the books or the titles of the book. So, but you can find information about Hidden Life of Trees everywhere. I'm going to choose to not go to Amazon. It looks like they created a movie too. I want to check that out. So this is one of a number of books I read that just kind of blew me away, in the sense that we as humans, through science, know so much about the way our planet works, the way other forms of life work on our planet, that it just makes it's both awesome and incredible and inspiring and so depressing that we are so proud of all the knowledge we acquire. And what do we do with it? We just mostly kill what we find out about. Trees are so amazing, and the things that you will learn about them and how they, notice the subtitle, what they feel and how they communicate. It is now pretty well understood that trees actually communicate with each other through basically the fungi networks below, connecting between roots. Also, it's now been pretty well established that mother trees will send, so they share resources among the trees through these networks. And the mother tree will actually share more resources, will prioritize resources to the trees that grew from their seeds.
Wow.
It's just incredible. So Hidden Life of Trees, if you want to be blown away and completely change the way you look at and see a tree for the rest of your life and treat them and respect them, that's the one for you. All right.
That's amazing. Barry says whales.
All right, great. Save the whales. We'll do what we can. We'll help. So thanks for joining us, everybody. And there's one more comment from Nils here. Let's see. I love that. Whoops. performance tuning depending on the DB version. Interesting, Jamal. If you have any specifics to follow up from that, I'd love to hear about it. And Nil said, wrapping only removes comments before obfuscation compression. Okay. I don't have a lot of experience with wrapping. I've never done much of it. And picturing version-specific PLB files from one source. Yeah. Okay. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully that was interesting to you. Download that script. Try it out. If you actually end up using my version generation script for conditional compilation in your own products, please let me know.
We'll link to it in the video description in case anybody looks for it. And you'll have it in your blog as well.
Great. And yeah, can they put comments on my blog posts?
We can make sure they can. I'll double check that.
We have comments enabled. Yes. So feel free to come back to this post and let me know that you use this. I'll be so delighted. It'll make my day. Okay. So stay safe, stay healthy, get vaccinated, get boosted. Don't take unnecessary risk with yourself or your family. Remember, it's never just you. We're all in this together, and I'll see you next month. Happy coding. Thanks, everybody.
Happy coding. Bye, everyone.